Let's get it. All right, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast where Bitcoin culture meets business and finance. We catch up on news, tweets, videos, charts, trends, and any other Bitcoin related content that stood out to us in the past 2 weeks. Powered by OnRamp, I'm joined by Brian and Michael. What's up, guys?
We're powering the whole industry at this point. We need some extra juice right now because the wind has been taken out of the sails of the believers. Where we're going, there's going to be very few people left holding spot cold storage Bitcoin the way it looks.
I feel the same. I think it's so interesting. I just saw Simon Dixon. Wait, I can quickly pull it up. I thought it was so funny. Like the whole clickbait era is so wild, guys. Like
Alive and well.
Can I pull
yeah, but
something
like
out? Can I pull something out just before we go? And whenever the price does what it does, your heuristic on if you follow somebody moving forward should be, and probably won't, but should be if they associated with a DAT. Right? Like if they're still hanging around this space talking about Bitcoin and have no affiliation with a digital asset treasury company, I can guarantee you they're probably a good friend of mine and they have high signal and high moral integrity. I can call some of those out if we want to, but we should really look there because where we go has proven that people will just fleece you and take your money and lose it based on all the shit we talked about. Sailors saying, sell your car, sell your house, double up leverage. You're pretty much wrecked now via your God sailor. And we just have to get that understood and known because this will only continue for till $1 million and then a $10 million because this is called the Wild West. We're monetizing a new money in not only reality, like in real time. And there's always going to be somebody out there trying to chase it and take your money. And so that's just, we're seeing it right now. There's a lot of people that got liquidated or lost a lot of wealth.
I sold a kidney. Yeah, I know, but no, I you know what is interesting? Yesterday I was thinking about why are people so infatuated with the history of the gold rush in California and like people from all over the country came there, right? And they started looking for gold. Like that's a super crazy romantic story where, by the way, also a lot of scams and stuff happened, right? And that's where the whole
Snake oil salesmen were created during that, right?
exactly. Yeah. That's where all the picks and shovels stuff, of course, comes from, right? But we are actually living through that time right now with Bitcoin. And I like that Michael is pointing this out. But this is going to take a very long time. And there's going to be opportunities on opportunities for people to pitch you different derivatives, different forms and shapes of, whatever is attached to Bitcoin and see if there's people that are interested. And I agree. I mean, as much as crypto was a Wild West, yeah, the more clear it becomes how valuable Bitcoin is, it'll also probably become more and more a Wild West. What I wanted to show you is so funny. Um, you know, you probably saw like all the tweets that had millions of views, hundreds of thousands, millions of views about, Epstein is Satoshi and blah, 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 blah. And then, we have Simon Dixon, like super OG. I don't know how many followers does he have, 200 something. Okay. This has 30,000 views. It's literally Epstein ordering Bitcoin for dummies on Amazon. And I mean, he knew Bitcoin so well that he either needed to order that for himself or he couldn't explain it to a friend. And that's why he needed to buy a book about it. Right. And then there's people saying, he's definitely not Satoshi, but he was actively, explaining blockchain stuff, blah, blah. Well, yeah, if you are constantly trying to figure out where to put your fucking tentacles in, then I don't think it's crazy that
Yeah, it would be more surprising if he wasn't talking about Bitcoin at some point in like 2014, 2015. Like, he had his hands in everything and he was talking to people in tech. Like,
well, they
yeah,
even talked about it in 2011, which, in my mind, I would say that is a signal. It's a signal that this obscure, weird internet thing is on the radar of
Yeah.
people in those circles. Yeah, I mean, I've just been replying the last few days. Open source computer protocol. Like, if you don't understand what an open source computer protocol is, then
I
I
like
cannot
that.
understand it for you.
I haven't heard that, but that's a good way to frame it. It's like maybe we wouldn't be onto something if Epstein wasn't a little interested in this kind of new form of money. But what's interesting, I mean, because he was pretty interested in a lot of nefarious shit. Um, But what is fascinating about that is like, I'm convinced that the powers that be just understand we have no basis in reality anymore. And it stems not only from like the slop of AI, but just the fundamental basis of like how money and value accrues, right? People lack that. So you can send all these crazy rabbit holes, like the shit you were sending me, Bram, people have sent, which you just referenced below there about, I think he was trying to convey that maybe he could be Satoshi or he was doing something. It's like people will just create their own constructs based on like little breadcrumbs that are thrown out there, which is like part of that whole like slop. And so, yeah, like there's a lot of obviously merit to the stuff that's going on. And hopefully we'll talk about, I think it's one of the topics about some of the Epstein files in relation to Bitcoin. But there's also like these mental models people just conjure up because they have too much time plugged into the computer. They start connecting dots and it's like the Pepe, whatever on Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where next thing you know, you're trying to explain how Epstein was Satoshi.
It's also like if you look at a lot of those slop, like very sensational type posts over the past week or so, like you look in the comments, it's a lot of XRP army in there. So a lot of this is not organic. Like
No.
it's it's other bag holders trying to cling on to anything they can to shit on Bitcoin, which many such cases.
Well, I two things, and the B cash people, to them, I just say, well, you forked and you lost. Like I mean, I was there when the block size wars were happening. I didn't really pay attention afterwards. I personally think big blocks would have been bad. That's kind of my um, conclusion. And this is the whole point of Bitcoin: is you can short it, you can fork it, you can do all these things, and eventually energy will converge on the longest and the most trustworthy chain. And I think that is what is happening. And by the way, to all the XRP people, I just reply, where are the first 30,000 blocks since Genesis, right? Or why is block 32,000 your Genesis block? And no one ever really replies because these guys don't really understand the fundamental problem with the flawed integrity of the beginning of that blockchain. But it's fine. You got to I think just let these people go. But something that I think Mike said just made me think of my link that I wanted to do as the last, but I'll do it as the first, because for me this was I saw someone post this picture, and it's from Reddit. It's quite old, but I have this saved in my phone because I just absolutely loved this the first time I saw this. So I think this is probably like 5 years old or something. But I'll read it, and I wonder what you guys think. It says, I finally think I understand Bitcoin. It is a silent project that operates in the background. There's no face to it. The founders created it and walked away. It's like an elegant clock set into motion that continues to tick. There's no promise of some complex protocol to come 3, 5, or 10 years down the road. It does not. It does what it's supposed to now without self-promotion from the founders. Since it doesn't need self-promotion to thrive, it doesn't fall victim to the vices of marketing from greedy, charismatic leaders with overly complex projects. Sure, there's Sailor and Novograds that sometimes fall into that role, but Bitcoin doesn't need, well, Novogratz also fell into other roles, Luna, right? But Bitcoin doesn't need them to survive and won't need them when they die. The project works now. It does what it's supposed to do, and it'll continue to do that, to do what it's supposed to. It's the money of the future of our science fiction novels. There's no crypto Chris marketing shitty debit cards. There's no charismatic Do Kwon doing a Forbes Steve Jobs photo shoot with a black t-shirt and a white background. There's no Jay Powell magically expanding the money supply with a cobalt-fueled wand. Cobalt-fueled wand is fire, by the way. Creating a 9 trillion USD balance sheet out of thin air. Bitcoin takes out the corruption of humans because the humans that created it stepped away. Sure, people will build corrupt systems around it, but Bitcoin itself is a simple, pure, and elegant vehicle silently ticking away in the background until the ticking becomes so loud that no one can ignore it. And what I just love about this is that once you see this, right, it's a protocol for money. Enough people adopted it that it's just chugging along, and every block that gets mined onto this immutable time chain, this ledger, increases the integrity of this blockchain. And that's why Jeff Booth always says, as long as it stays decentralized and secure and you keep on adding blocks to it, that is the only thing that needs to happen. And all this noise around it, right? Like that's where the meme Bitcoin doesn't care comes from. It's fucking irrelevant. Like you get this or you don't. And the Bitcoin blockchain is basically, the highest form of ordered information ever to exist. And when that just proliferates and gets longer and longer and more immutable, that makes it more trustworthy. It invites other people to use that trust to then contribute to it. And that is basically I would say, self-propelling, positive feedback loop that eventually creates this organic growth. But this takes time. It's so boring. It's such the opposite of everything that is fiat, right? That this for me was just a really grounding post. I really, really loved it. So it was really great. I saw this yesterday again and decided to repost. And I wonder what you guys think.
Yeah, I love it. I've seen that one before in the past, and it's a very succinct, concise distillation of what this thing is. And I in the Unwrap newsletter earlier this week, I wrote something similar where it was just, there was a lot of noise, to your point, the past few weeks around, control vectors around Bitcoin. And it's like, no, like you have to go back to the first principles, the fundamentals of what this thing is. And it's fundamentally more akin to fire, the internet, the printing press, language itself, where it doesn't matter who contributed to the early development of these things. They become ubiquitous. They become embedded in civilization as tools, open, neutral tools. And until you get to that point of understanding, like it's not, it's frankly not going to click for you. You're just going to look at it as an asset or a number on a screen. But it's much more than that, right? It's a network, it's a tool, and it's open and neutral. And those characteristics make it more like other technologies that, it frankly doesn't matter who was involved in their creation, because they now exist. The genie's out of the bottle, and there's nothing you can do to stop it or coerce it or influence it or change it with just monetary sort of incentives alone.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I think of is all that's happened, the past couple of months or last week, and what you're relating to is just comes down to understanding of Bitcoin, because there really is very few people that have their arms wrapped around it. And it's indicated not only in the price, but like the different thought leaders and people that are out there positing or explaining or telling people to do the different things, like whether it's quantum or you need inflation because of the mining and the spend around security, or it's park it in some other vehicle and that's how you get your exposure. Or put it on a plastic device and it's going to last for 100 years and don't think about the repercussions if you get hit by a bus. Like, the reality is there's just few people that fundamentally grasp this. And then what happens is, if somebody generally that goes all in becomes a thought leader, or we're listening, or people are listening to, if they didn't grasp it, they end up touting like the wrong information and it gets picked up by the market. Like, that's ultimately what's happened, because if somebody deeply understood Bitcoin, they would deeply understand why you wouldn't want to centralize it with a third party and then relay the custody and all the things associated. And so when I read these things and I think about them, it's just that early. And the reality is more people should actually probably own less than more, because if you own all this Bitcoin but don't understand it, you're the first to puke it because you don't even understand what you're holding. So you should probably take a step back and then do a little more research and realize, oh, well, it's this. But then if it's this is the second and third order effects, right? Because that's the natural version of like why would never be able to build. And I don't think anybody credibly would ever want to build a or a custodial exchange, because if this thing actually works, well, we know what happened with gold. And ultimately, whether it's the state or somebody else will attack that, it's an attack vector. So there's just a lot of like second and third order things that come from understanding this new asset class. We didn't live on a gold standard, so we don't understand the counterparty risk. We don't understand a lot of the things on how we got there. And then you have a digital bearer asset that's never existed and there's no bailouts. And so there's just a lot of knowledge. And so if you don't have it, you shouldn't actually allocate until you get to that level where your conviction grows, and then you don't have to puke it out, but you also don't go do something really shady. Because that's honestly the craziest part about all this is more people have lost Bitcoin, right? And probably bought it in the sense of like, and still hold it. Like, all these people from the beginning of Bitcoin till now have just hold big goose eggs because of FTX, Genesis, BlockFi, Celsius, DATs. Like, there's all this shit that continues and will always continue because everything will look better, faster, stronger than just holding spot and cold storage. which again is like, it's like a reflection of the market, but also how many people tell you that in this market to just buy the Bitcoin and put it in cold storage and then just go back to working? Like, because it doesn't pay.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm scrolling really quick on my X because I don't know if you saw this. Let me see if I can find it.
Brom's just free flowing. He's just going off. We used to like have a regimen and go through. He started.
I
Now
know
he's
I
just,
have
like,
a
pulling up
regiment. I have a
leaves.
regiment. I have a regiment.
It's
but it was
late for him, so he's probably taking some edibles or something. Is just kind of he's just flowing with the pot.
flowing with the pot. Yeah, look at me. Yeah, here. Wait, I got it.
That's how you know he did. He goes, look,
Look, I fucking love this, dude. Like,
Yeah, this was out of left field.
this was fire. I don't know if you saw this, Mike, but this is Kiss, Gene Simmons Kiss.
oh,
My
really?
personal
It's the real Gene
philosophy.
Simmons.
It's the real Gene Simmons. My personal philosophy, RE Bitcoin, is to hold, hodl. I firmly believe in the future. You need to do your own research and make your own decisions. I'm like, what the frick?
Good advice. Good advice.
So I asked Grok, give him some Bitcoin face paint. So
Jesus.
it did. I mean,
I did not see that. That's pretty incredible.
I mean that was a nice bridge from what you were talking about, right? Like this is you don't really often see that advice, and definitely not from Gene Simmons. That was super random. Okay,
When it comes to holding Bitcoin securely, peace of mind starts with architecture. OnRamp's multi-institution custody distributes control across 3 independent regulated key holders in a 2 of 3 quorum. No single point of failure, no pooled or omnibus exposure, segregated client-titled vaults. You retain full legal ownership while OnRamp coordinates security, compliance, and operational workflows behind the scenes. It's strength of many delivered through the simplicity of one. Multi-institution custody is the foundation for everything we build. Sound infrastructure that distributes counterparty risk and provides fault-tolerant resilience with clear audits and institutional controls. And now, OnRamp is piloting flat, predictable pricing, making best-in-class Bitcoin custody and financial services more accessible now than ever. OnRamp, strength in many, simplicity in one. To learn more, check out onrampbitcoin.com.
thanks, Brian. This is yours.
Yeah, this was our buddy Eric Balchunas. We just had him on the last trade yesterday, which came out this morning. And we had a nice little therapy session with him, but he had some good data just around the ETF flows in particular, which I found pretty interesting. There was, significant outflows yesterday, over 400 million, and year to date, 2.2 billion. But 90% of basically the dollars allocated to Bitcoin ETFs, since they went live, hasn't moved. So I think this is interesting just in the context of, we've talked about sort of this IPO moment, this transition of old holders to new holders. And these new holders don't have some of the same psychological baggage, is one way to put it, around 4-year cycle thinking, or even just short-termism and just general sort of having a more of a degenerate trading mentality, where they're doing, legitimate due diligence on this asset and forming a view that is longer than a few quarters or even a year. And so I think this is fascinating just in the respect that this capital, at least initially, this capital that has gone into the ETFs appears to be stickier than perhaps past cohorts of capital that have come into Bitcoin. Seeing a 30 to 50% decline and 90% of that not moving, I think is pretty remarkable and a very positive, constructive signal of what's to come. Because as we've talked about in the past, a lot of these channels where these ETF flows are coming from, the brokerages, the wirehouses, the banks, are really, still in the early stages of broadening access to these things, even getting to the point of like soliciting access. Typically at most advisors right now, the end client still has to request and want exposure to these things. They're not typically being sold or solicited to the end client. And so very early days on like the pipes actually opening up. But I think this is a super positive signal that this capital may be longer term in nature than we're historically used to for new capital coming into the space. And I thought this was incredibly bullish.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. One of them is the notion of like a lot of the capital that came in, we've talked about before. not a lot, but there's a large percentage of individuals that have wanted Bitcoin, but just wanted to buy it through their brokerage. So they probably have done research, seen it, but there's a real bigger aperture like that's worth discussing and looking at is those people, it's a very small percentage of their portfolio. So even if it draws down 40%, like they're not looking at the screen because they just watch their net worth cut
Right.
50%. But the other side of that, we should be, and it's something that I'm learning is like more empathetic and just understanding of like, nobody really wants to watch their portfolio draw down 50%. And B, if they don't understand what we just talked about, nor should they, because then they'll puke it out because they won't understand. They'll think quantum or Epstein are an issue. And so this goes to the angle of everyone's going to come at their own kind of sizing and understanding. And whether it's, index, whether it's gold, whether it's bonds, like there is just this reality that people will have to adopt in the size that is it akin or attuned to their age, their retirement profile, their income. And yes, if you're disenfranchised and you're a 28-year-old millennial and there's no hope, like, yes, put all your money in Bitcoin. That would be like, what else was I going to do? But the reality is like, and that maybe is the case for a lot of people at that age, but it's not the case for all the world's wealth. That's why you don't see this asset class do it, because there's still a big misunderstanding of like, will it persist into perpetuity? So it makes a lot of sense why they're not selling it, because it's like 2%, if not less than their portfolio. So why would they care if it went down 30%? Like they're probably just like, yeah, that's stupid, but it's like, why am I going to sell it? I'm already down 30%. It's only, 1% or 0.1% of my portfolio. Just like let it run.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, it's a great point. We talked about specifically that with Eric as well, in terms of this cohort of buyers is different in that exact regard. It's typically a much smaller allocation size, and that is sort of fundamental to withstanding volatility. Is you've positioned it accordingly, and it's not fluctuating your net worth by 50%, and you can have a little bit of more grace with the position effectively when things like this do happen.
I think your explanations are probably better than the take I had on this. I also think that in this context, the actual like financial advisors of these funds uh, do actually explain. I think that's my assumption. What Bitcoin is also, right? So I feel that if you are just a general person and you're learning on social media or podcasts or YouTube or whatever, you know, it can be quite a rugged journey. There's a lot of noise. But it's hard to differentiate between like who's talking fundamentally about Bitcoin, who's a hype person, whatever. Oh, Cardano, this guy's a billionaire. I should follow. Like whatever, all this fucking noise, right? But if you're talking to your iBit financial advisor, I'm the Bitcoin guy here at BlackRock, and I'm going to explain to you why you need to own Bitcoin at XYZ percentage. Then you actually get a proper explainer. I mean, we saw these videos about Bitcoin that BlackRock did right in the beginning when the ETF launched. I mean, I, that's probably a decent explainer for a lot of people that eventually invest in something like this. So that was kind of my
Yeah.
thoughts around this.
I mean, to be fair, right? Like to contradict or speak of the other side of my mouth is yes, until a certain extent, right? Because we know that these firms don't actually fundamentally understand Bitcoin. They probably will tell you to rebalance. They're going to put a bunch of like altcoins in front of them. So I think this is really why businesses like us and also the opportunity is so great, because it's really just going to be digital native firms and people that understand Bitcoin deeply. But that's why I get excited about pods like this and what we're building, is because we're not just like so myopic and saying sell your shares and park all your money in BTC. It's like we help you navigate through that and can come at it through an objective lens of like, what's your right situation, because it's personal for everyone, not only custody, but how much Bitcoin they should own. And nobody's really taking that like response, because between me and you, like I have all my money in Bitcoin. It's always been in Bitcoin, but like the rational decision is not for most people to do that, because for a lot of reasons. And we saw that play out. Like you watch something like this downturn and you're puking your brains out. If you're all in, you have leverage, your family's pissed off, you're not sleeping well. You got to really like know what you're signing up for. And so, yeah, it's a treacherous game because I don't think anybody's well positioned, because the crypto people tell you to do a bunch of bullshit and the TradFi people tell you to do a bunch of bullshit. And that's honestly why there's so much asymmetry, is because it's really hard to triangulate like what the signal versus the noise is. But if you find
Yeah.
it, you benefit.
Yeah, that's something I also wanted to say, and that we've said many times on this podcast before. But the asymmetry is the opportunity, right? But you need to do the work. I mean, I'm in a similar situation as Michael, and I was fucking grumpy the last 2 days, right? So I mean, I also don't like it when it goes down. But then I don't know if you saw my post, but I posted I had a screenshot from when it went from like 500 to 100. And I just posted, I've been here before,
So it-
multiple times, and it's still fucked up, right? Like, it's still not nice to experience. So
in reality, like, we shouldn't be that grumpy. Like, there's a version of, if you have leverage, and I would say we have a form of leverage, me personally, because we're building a business and everything's tied to it. So it is harder when you see your balance sheet and things go down. But if you're just like working on your craft in saving in Bitcoin, it hit me yesterday. I was like, holy crap, I thought we were 120 forever. And that really keeps a lot of people out of multiple coins, whole coins, whatever. It's like we were sitting at 60. It's like, what a godsend for somebody that's been doing all the work that can go and pile in or sell something and go buy. Like, so that's a huge op for a majority of people that don't even hold Bitcoin yet. And so if you're stacking your balance sheet, which is in dollars, and you could buy more Bitcoin yesterday versus 3 months ago, like, that's huge.
And that's the craziest part. That has never been a bad decision in the past 17 years to buy at this time. Basically.
And also,
it could still go to 50, 45, whatever, right? Let's say if it's really a bear market, like some people say, and then some days after halving, let's say till October, we go to 45, you buy DCA on the way to 45 and then back up. Like, it's a very, very rare opportunity. And this whole idea of, Bitcoin crashed to 60K, like, it's literally the meme. It's the meme that we've been talking about.
The only thing I was going to say is it relates to the point you just made, sort of around like DCA and that strategy. Like, when the haters and the dunkers come out when these types of moves happen, it's always a cherry picked time frame, right? Like, you've been flat since 21. It's like, well, no, if you deeply understood Bitcoin back in 21 and you were DCAing from 21 until now, you're still massively up. Like, you're not flat. And they always fail to mention that. They just assume everyone bought the top and now they're flat. So it's sort of disingenuous in that respect. Like, if you do get to a level of understanding where you're indiscriminately accumulating regardless of the price, you're actually in a great position right now.
Yeah. Can you pull up, this is probably my favorite all-time Bitcoin chart. It doesn't get posted a lot. And this is one of the times it looks the least red or the most red, but it's Bitcoin profitable days. I've always gravitated towards it because, like, there's no shortage of like charts. And for a layman like myself, like,
Mike, sorry, can you zoom in a bit?
Yeah. I usually get confused, or you look at like holaways, you're trying to like discern, but like here, it's pretty straightforward. It's just how many days, if you're holding Bitcoin, has it been profitable? And usually this chart is always green with like a slight hint in the red, because it's only for 17 years in certain days that you're not, to Brian's point, underwater. And even with this downturn, you still look at it, the majority of the time holding the asset, you're holding a profitable asset. So I think this just underpins a lot of indiscriminately, as Brian pointed out, just storing your excess value and time in a harder money pays off on a long enough time horizon. You don't have to wait that long.
Yeah. Okay, you can keep talking. This was yours.
Yeah. So now maybe some people understand the whole meme of staying humble and stacking sats, because a lot of people got greedy and stacked DATs. And there was this from Artemis Research, $25 billion cumulatively downed in total, and then zero above their cost basis. There was today, I think somebody, Jackson, shared Empery Digital's like working on some form of activist takeover, because they're just like, what the hell are you doing? You have this asset. Why are you still sitting on it? You're watching the price crater. And I think it just goes into what we've been pounding the drum since the very beginning of this, is that these things never made sense. Their volatility was going to be even more enhanced when these downturns happen. You don't have governance. You're going to see them puke out these coins. I think it came out that like Saquon's was selling now. Like, I mean, everyone, they never made sense. And I think it's just important to call out, because Yeah. I know there's another aspect, which is I want to use it on the third link, but it is worth referencing. That like all these notes and emails haven't come out, but like these creepy people that were hanging out on Epstein Islands, like they were creeped out by Sailor. So, you take that information with what it
I
is.
think that's a good thing, to be honest. I'm sorry.
Well, you
We
can
don't. I don't think we have enough. I don't think we have enough information.
That was
my
literally
take.
like one sentence. One sentence.
well, I don't know if all the deals are out, but it's just mainly the point of like there's rational fundamentals of why you do not want a decentralized asset parked with a central entity. Like it's that simple. We don't have to make it that complex. We can pull up 3 months ago, you referencing Stretch, and then it's like, how does it work? It's like, oh, I don't know. It's like the notion of like you add all that complexity into the thing that is what we just talked about, and you're just asking for disaster across the board. What is playing out across these companies, I just don't, and this is not popular because almost everyone's in this trade. I don't see on a long enough time horizon how MicroStrategy and Sailor end up good for Bitcoin. And so
Yeah.
that whole, because what goes up has to come down. It's just physics. So all these
It is
flows,
down.
yeah, well but also if you're holding 500,000 or whatever BTC, where does that sit on a long enough time horizon? And then the other aspect is really the market structure, because I think a lot of people, and we talked about this before, if you don't understand Bitcoin and then you have these incentives that look like they're pumping your bags, you get loud and you join their boards and you pump these DATs, but you didn't even really understand Bitcoin because you wouldn't have put your career and your reputation there. And one of the easiest examples is think about how much Bitcoin people do not own because either they were buying these paper shares or there were people selling via in-kind deposits, right? So how much Bitcoin was put in these treasuries? This is Samani. We'll talk about the crypto bullshit, but like he took out that DAT that he had a bunch of Solana locked up. He was able to put them in the DAT, probably sell those shares, get out at the top without selling on the open market, which is what a lot of your favorite influencers were able to do behind the scenes by parking these DATs, which theoretically took some of the sell pressure or the buy pressure away. And these are all things that people don't understand. They just like go and tout and like, this is a thing, it's better, you're going to get better multiples. And everyone went and took, the candy. And so nobody else called them out. And that's the whole deal. It's like the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing you he didn't exist. It's like the greatest trick your local influencer ever played is convincing you that the DAT was the right trade versus buying spot Bitcoin.
Yeah, I know. I know you have this take on this, and I think
It's not a take; it's empirical evidence by everything.
yeah. Okay. I agree with you. Um, my personal view on strategy is a bit different. I mean, if you realize what Bitcoin is, right? And I think we all know the arc of Sailor and famously dismissing it, right? And then the whole Sailor story. I can imagine that you both have maybe woken up sometime in the night or in an evening or in the morning where you were like, holy fuck, is this Bitcoin? Like, is it this big? Is it this unique? Is it this type of opportunity? Or, the Andreas Antonopoulos clip, right? Where he says like, I went into this fugue state for like a week and like, fully into it and couldn't sleep. And I saw all the fucking stuff and I read all the history. I mean, I think we all see it like that, and I think Sailor also sees it like that. I've watched a lot of Sailor stuff and like the Breedlove series and whatever, just a lot of hours of Sailor. So I think he really understands Bitcoin, and I think he sees a certain type of opportunity to get it right. And it's again similar as in the gold rush. There were people that got a lot of gold by using a certain uh, strategy. Did that work out for everyone who joined them? Probably not, but I kind of see it like that. This is just his way of attempting to acquire as much of the hardest money to ever exist. I mean, I I I think, it's a great attempt. Doesn't mean I don't agree with you in a sense that, if you truly understand Bitcoin, you should buy Bitcoin. But I don't see Bitcoin as an investment. I think a lot of people also don't see Bitcoin as an investment, right? You would rather see MicroStrategy as an investment, something that you deem riskier than Bitcoin. And because 99% of the people still don't even understand why they would even need Bitcoin, Sailor does still have an opportunity to acquire capital in all these different types of ways from people that still think fiat money is a thing. So this is kind
Yeah,
of
I think
how I disagree
I
with that. I just see it like that.
I think it's fair, and I will give. And I talked about this on this Proof of Thought podcast this past week about because I think he was long Sailor and he was fair, like not long any of the other assets, but there is something to an immaculate conception with, and I don't think I've shared this outside of the pod I did with him, so I'll share it again about like with MicroStrategy and Bitcoin that you can kind of do it once because you see the scale and what he was able to get to. So I will give you that if
Yeah.
there's any credibility to these things, there is that. But from being around here long enough and seeing inorganic pumping of things, FTX is the best example, and watching the evangelization and the like stamping of approval of nobody, giving you think about like 2020, Bitcoin's still taboo, and a company comes out and is stacking and is using the debt market to buy more Bitcoin. And he's out there basically effectively pumping his stock and nobody did anything. There's just a lot of inertia and momentum that I don't see how this is organically spewed up. And when I see that, it ultimately tells me there's something at play and at hand. And then I don't feel like has the best interest long term. And so I stay away from it. And then the other side of that is ultimately, if we agree that it's really impossible without time to understand Bitcoin, imagine layering Bitcoin and then layering in MicroStrategy and their whole debt structure, and then the amount of Bitcoin and why they don't have to puke Bitcoin out until it gets to $7,000, and then not puking your own position and selling those shares when it draws down 50%, when people are saying he was in Epstein's deal and they could be insolvent and the counterparty may be insolvent with Coinbase and we don't know where his assets sit. It just doesn't even rationally make sense as an investment if you deeply understood Bitcoin, because most people that deeply understand Bitcoin never participate in this. Hence, going back to the beginning about the principled individuals, never got involved because they all understood Bitcoin and it didn't make sense. So I can see how, like, theoretically in the short term, it does make sense. I just think long term, we look back 10 years from now, it'll be like, how the hell did that sicko know? And it'll just happen.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I think
Brian's long MCR, so
I think your point on being early and first and amassing this massive amount of BTC does matter in terms of its sustainability, longevity. But to your point on the custody side, like, if something happens with their counterparties 5-10 years from now, none of that really matters. But Bram, I would agree with you in the sense that, like, multiple things can be true in the sense that, like, Bitcoin is money, it's savings technology. Something like this is just fundamentally different. And if you understand that and understand that you're taking more risk, it's more speculative. It's a corporate entity with management risk, execution risk, governance risk, custody risk.
Exactly.
Then that's what it is. And I don't think that
And you should judge it like that.
you should judge it like that. And I don't think that those things necessarily mean it's doomed to fail inevitably. Like to Michael's, I think the argument you're making, but so yeah, I guess I'm somewhere in the middle, but I think being early did matter. And I think there is credence to the idea that yes, there's a ton of capital that exists globally that doesn't have a deep understanding of Bitcoin, but they want exposure in some sense. And
that's why it's a fallacy. I talked about it with the guys. Like, you can break down every product in MicroStrategy, and then I can break down what the rational deal is for an institution. So institution doesn't want volatility.
I'm not saying there's not a rational path. I'm just saying that, like,
But I'm saying that the
why it
explanation.
exists.
Yeah, but I'm saying the explanation why it exists doesn't even rationally make sense from the investor type. It makes sense from a retail perspective on why that story makes sense, but it doesn't. Like Harvard, one of the most sophisticated investors, went and bought IBIT, and that's 0.03% percentage of their total allocation. When they get to 3%, they're going to do something like multi-institution. They're going to go and do it the right way because their whole endowment and credibility underpins their deep understanding of that.
But that is super logical.
The point being is that if somebody is worried about volatility per what they say about the allocation, all you have to do is just buy less Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You don't need a third party to go and take all the extra risk on. In the same way, if you want some like incomes in dividends or whatever, you can buy less Bitcoin, go and park it in a treasury, go park it in options. Like there's a bunch of other ways
Yeah.
to do any of those products without some like first time ever launching something. And then to Brian's main point, which is the thing that we didn't even talk about here, is the thing that hasn't worked for 17 years is centralized custody. He doesn't tell you where it is. He doesn't even recognize that it's a value of importance, which should be the big red flag, because that's the whole thing, is that at the end of the day, any relationship, whether it's personal or a business, if the foundation is rooted or fragmented, then ultimately it will perpetuate and it'll show itself at a certain time. And I don't think the genesis of that whole endeavor was rooted in good faith. That's a hot take. But the point being is, if there's even remotely true, that ties into why he doesn't want anybody to know where the underlying asset sits. Because it's as simple as that. Like, just show us where the asset is, and then you could probably get a lot more credibility.
That I mean, I totally agree with that. I guess maybe I'm
yeah.
optimistic in the sense that I think he does it. I think they do adopt some form of multi-institution at some point.
But that's the take of why it's also underpinning that, because any rational person that's sitting on $50 billion plus that understands that things like on-ramp exist, and you don't have to go, you can go, others would adopt them. If their whole literally life was dedicated to this, you wouldn't have a third-party custodian that historically has lost it. If he's that much of a genius and he understands everything we're talking about, then why wouldn't you just adopt a better form of custody? Unless you're not the best actor. It's not like rocket science. The same thing is like, do you want 3 or 1? 3 is better than 1, generally, people would do. You get 3 custodians, you get it on chain and verifiable. It's not like he knows we exist.
I cannot argue against this. So I think I'm going to the next link. And Mike, last time you weren't here and we had Jackson on, which was great. And I had this clip of Michael Burry. And at the end, I was just like, okay, we need to reach out to Michael Burry, right? So
He's tripled down since this tape.
I just tried to tickle him a bit. So I said, Michael Burry will figure out Bitcoin at some point in 2026 and go fully autistic for 7 days to be born again as a Bitcoin maxi. But he's like fractal charting on X. And I'm like, dude, my guy, what are you doing? You got a big brain and you're gonna use arrows on this chart to make a point. I'm gonna be boring because I'm saying this for months now, almost every episode. I'm just bewildered. Like, what are these people doing? And especially, I don't know, Mike, if you saw that clip. Have you seen this clip, Mike, or not? No. Oh, we can play it. We can play it real quick.
It's just fiat brain. Everyone just has fiat brain. They took
no, but he understands.
No. But listen,
point is he understands fiat's fucked.
I'll show it. Maybe if people watched it last time. Sorry, I'm showing it again, but I just want to show Michael that he gets it. Like, he gets the reason why.
Which the degree to which, well, I think the point at which the degree to which we can tax our population is eclipsed by the amount of our interest on our debt. Basically makes us a Ponzi scheme of some sort. And I think that's the point. I think it's very hard to pick that spot. There's a long history. This is one of those things I think our leaders, our government are kind of in this teenage state right now. There's this long history we can rely on for a more mature view of how things work. And I think there's a long history of governments lasting a whole lot longer than they should. And, a lot that we'd rather not have happen. Certainly all the dictators seem to get it done.
I'll leave it at that. I think, Michael is in his teenage stage with Bitcoin. But yeah, like I said, I'm just fascinated by the fact that, these types of people are so close and they understand the problem. And then, this is what he's posting. So I just wanted to have like a little fun intermezzo and just, share my bewilderment again. But I wonder what you think, Mike.
I just think there's a lot of insanely smart people, without naming names, like big people that manage hedge funds that made a lot of money in the Big Short, the Republic, and they refuse to get Bitcoin as a solution. And I think there's just the version of like, it's hard to recognize that there's a lot of bias built into a lot of this stuff, right? Because if you saw it, because a lot of these people are out there like Epstein, and they were looking at esoteric products. And there's individuals like Luke Groman who were objective enough, as he's referenced on our pod and probably others, that he just needed to play with it, because when you have a little and you're playing with it, you're just opening up the aperture to not be biased and say that this is all BS. And that did him wonders, because he realized that this is a currency thing. There's a currency crisis. And then you have others that miss it. And then they ultimately are looking for every reason to justify why it's BS. And they continue down that. And that's a dangerous game, because you're effectively throwing good money after bad. And so there's that component, and there's the component of like everything else under the sun. I think that's really what quantum stems from. It's that we just in our bones don't want to see new things, because it's just like society and technology is moving at such a fast pace. And so when you say there's a new form of money, you can't wrap your arms around it, it's not physical. The natural thing for a lot of people to want to do is just come up with every reason why it can't work, whether it's drug dealers, X, Y, Z, and now quantum. And like, that's just how we end up. And then there's a bunch of experimental stuff that people were potentially took in the past 5 years that has mucked up their brain. And I don't think people are rational and socially like all there. For a lot of individuals, we see this all the time. And so, yeah, I don't hold any of these people credible in any respect, because they have certain very specific domain expertises. But like when you try to look at it from a 360 view, that's one of the things, because I was doing a lot of, not like soul searching, but yesterday just like looking at the price and like, man, why don't we sign up for this, blah, blah, blah. And I was just thinking about like, independent of even sitting flat, think about how much benefit everyone here has had, and probably people listening, by just holding Bitcoin in a larger position, because you start to look at the world for what it is. You start to learn about things, because you just have a fundamental like rooting in like how value is created and how value is not created, and then how it starts to manipulate all these and distorts these other markets. It's like he would be really well served by just understanding how money works. And then if he really understood how money works and then did the work on Bitcoin, there would be a natural inclination to say, well, maybe this thing could work. Why would it be the opposite, that it doesn't work? It doesn't hurt him if it does. But there's bias, and we're humans.
Yeah, it's well said. I think it comes down to the bias that a lot of people that come from the hedge fund world or TradFi just naturally have against Bitcoin, because they, to your point, they saw it at some point, didn't buy it, and now they're just fundamentally biased against it. Because Burry in particular, to the point of that clip, he understands the Federal Reserve is evil, and he's been a gold guy for some time. So the inclination, you would think, is there for him to actually do the work on it. I just think he hasn't done the work on it. Clearly, like he's bringing up that chart and saying these two bumps look like each other, so this thing's going to fail. It's like, well, sure, they might look like each other, and we just crash 50%, but the trajectory is upwards. And if you don't understand why the trajectory is upwards, then you're not going to be open-minded to the idea that Bitcoin could be the solution.
Yeah, and again, I'm just surprised that it seems like he cannot think from first principles, right? Like you said, he can describe this whole problem, but there is there is something that's blocking him, and that's also in general why I say I think you need to take a little red pill before you can take a blue pill, or sorry, you have to take a little red pill before you can take an orange pill, and it seems that and maybe this also shows how hard it is, right? There still seem to be people that were right in the middle of a giant red pill explosion that the great financial crisis was, and they saw it and they foresaw it, and he was fucking crazy, right? And everyone was mocking him that he was wrong, and he had to pay huge fucking fees to uphold this whole short, and then he was vindicated, right? I'm just still surprised that doesn't like red pill that your actual thesis played out. Wouldn't that be like the ultimate red pill in that context of where it also played out? It's funny because I'm not sure if you had him on the show, Pius. Pius Sprenger.
No.
I had him on the show. His boss was Greg Lipman. Basically the guy, Ryan Reynolds in the movie, the guy that was shopping around the thesis, basically, that Burry eventually took. But Pius was the engineer of all of this, so he engineered this whole way to short it, and he's a huge Bitcoiner. And eventually, when Greg Lipman left, he became the boss of Deutsche Bank there, etc. But so this is a guy that came from deep Wall Street TradFi and is now a full-on Bitcoiner. So it does exist. Like I know,
Well,
people that,
Yeah.
have changed their mind.
Not to like kind of discredit this whole conversation, but I'll try. Is it, it probably isn't relevant simply because remember a few episodes ago we talked about Tucker and like I forgot what it was, but he's had Sailor on and others, and then he ultimately was like, "This is all a scam" or whatever.
CIA.
Yeah. And so the reality is like with the more rational thought or ideas here, there are people that have takes for a reason. And what was once conspiracy this past week has been shown that there is this like shadow body that exists manipulating, controlling narratives, blah, blah, blah. So like there could be just an angle, or it's not that there could be, there is, because across socioeconomic, geopolitical, every respect you can name, somebody has come to the conclusion that Bitcoin makes sense. When you think about Chamath, David Sachs, Trump, Druckenmiller, like you can go down political people, professors. Point being is that like if somebody can't come to the conclusion, there's probably something else there that they're propagating, pushing, or have an incentive to push. Like what we talked about Ray Dalio pushing gold or whatever. So that I think that's probably more of it versus like the guy doesn't get it. Because again, it goes back to the Elon Musk thing. It's like Elon Musk gets this. Like we talked about it we had our buddy Cam Duty on earlier this week, and he was talking about something came up with deflation and universal high income, blah blah blah, and like something about Bitcoin came up, and then like Elon doesn't even like reference it or acknowledge it as like a solution because there is reality of like there's a current system that needs to continue to propagate around bonds specifically with the 60/40, and so there's a lot of seniorage that's in place to make sure that that narrative keeps in place for at least a while longer.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I thought about it like this on my own Bitcoin journey a lot. Like, I don't think I fully figured Bitcoin out, and Elon has not. That would be funny. Like I think it would just be naive to think they don't understand it. And like you said, just these whole circles. I saw Jason Calacanis, huge dork. I think he's such a dork. Like on X, talking about Bitcoin again. And he was flexing in 2011 that he knew the founders of Bitcoin. He was so early, and he's still talking shit about it. And he's been sitting next to fucking Chamath for like 10 plus years. If you hear about how Chamath talks about Bitcoin when Bitcoin is at like $500, you're like, dude, anyone in your fucking vicinity should be ultra orange pilled if this guy is talking about Bitcoin like that, right? But so I mean,
Yeah, and he's the other side of that spectrum. He's just not smart. No, like seriously, like he's just not
Jason?
smart. Like, yeah.
No,
Like,
I fully
it's
agree.
not like
Yeah, Jay, whatever. I
he's
hope he's just
incentivized.
such a dork.
He's just not.
Oh my
he's just
God.
not smart.
But it's the
There's-
same
yeah.
bias. It's the same bias, though. It's a very similar bias in the sense that
I think Jason
he
is
did
like
have the opportunity to understand it, and he didn't.
Yeah, but Jason is Dunning-Kruger, but he got rich in some fucking weird way. I don't know.
I heard he.
Anyway, yeah, yeah, exactly. He just bumped into Travis Kalanick. But yeah, I got a new link because of what Michael said, and I absolutely love this. So I want to play this before we go to our spirit animal, Bill 4.
This is another
I don't
great
watch it.
guy. He's another great sound guy. Called out the DATs. We got him on a pod. Love Checkmate. Good dude.
He's great. Yeah, this is fire. I love this.
There's two things that keep me bullish no matter what's going on. One, it's a 10x, more than a 10x improvement over its predecessor. I'm a gold holder and I'm a Bitcoin holder. And I can tell you, having used both, Bitcoin's better in every single way. Every single way. History shows that technology, as it evolves and we head to those 10x multiples, it takes over. And the second thing is, look at the quality of people who are Bitcoiners. Look at the diversity of their backgrounds. I'm a tunnel engineer. There's people who are doctors. There's people come from all these like fascinating, interesting backgrounds, and they've all converged on the same thing, being like Bitcoin's like the best thing since sliced bread. You're telling me that all of these smart INTJ engineer types, they're all dumb and idiots? Like, no. The most bullish thing about Bitcoin is the people who get attracted to it. I'm not betting against those people. So many Bitcoins came up and grew up in an era where the world hated Bitcoin. Every headline was negative. Every government didn't like it. It's getting banned, it's getting shut down. And yet we still formed enough conviction to be like, no way, I'm putting my whole life savings in this thing. We all formed a consensus that this thing kicks ass independently, whilst everyone was telling us that we were dead wrong and we stuck to our guns. I'm sorry, I'm not betting against those people. They get
Fucking legend. What a legend. I think this is such a great point, especially well, both points, but especially the first point about, once you see money as a technology, it's a tool that you use to, on one side of a value exchange between two, or no, well, let's say two parties. It's obviously the most important technology in communicating, value with each other. And like he's saying, in history, if you just look at history, all the really great technological advancements came from innovations or discoveries that enable to compact more energy in a smaller unit and therefore become more productive, right? So increase the use case, or speed up the use case, or broaden the use case, right? And with Bitcoin, it's the same. So I absolutely love that he touched upon that, because I think this is under discussed, right? There's not a lot of people that I think talk about it in this way. You still have like the gold bulls and saying like, oh, gold is 5,000 years, etc. Yeah, dude, but it's 2026. It's it's the digital era. We're talking about, agent swarms with AI. What are they gonna? How are they gonna pay with gold, or like a tokenized gold, whatever the fucking token is gonna be? So what he's saying is a history lesson in itself. If you look at history and technological advancements, this is factually correct. And Bitcoin is that, 100x that he said over its predecessor. And it's so clear. It's objectively clear when you look at the characteristics of Bitcoin. So I thought this was absolutely fantastic. I don't know if you guys have anything to say, but I can go to Bill for.
This is an aside. Like, that's something that nobody brings up. I don't think it's it's relevant. But like the notion that people bring up quantum and then nobody brings up gold being 30 trillion or 35 trillion, and that it's probably much more likely scientifically to be able to recreate gold, like because they've provably done it, than like quantum. Right. So like gold underpins global finance, is a sovereign asset. And it's much more likely that you're going to create, and it's still not economically feasible. But point being is, going to space and trying to do it, blah, blah, blah. But like, no, that never comes up around like, well, you would just wreck the whole financial system when it comes to gold, because you at least can see it. And I'm not saying that it's even close there, because we've made this point already. Like, it's not even, but it's just, that's how preposterous the bringing up of quantum is, that we've already proven that you can make gold, but it's not economically relevant.
Yeah. So
this is a theoretical construct.
It's a good bridge.
Here's the conversation no one wants to have. If something happened to you tomorrow, could your family access your Bitcoin? Really think about it. The seed phrase hidden in your house, the hardware wallet in the safe, that complex multi-sig setup. You understand it, but does your spouse? Do your children? Billions in Bitcoin are already lost forever because people did not plan for this moment. OnRamp's inheritance solution is built into our multi-institution custody from day one. 3 institutions, clear beneficiary designation, and professional succession planning. No technical knowledge required from your heirs. And with our new flat tier pricing starting at $250 monthly, your family won't face surprise custody costs just because Bitcoin appreciated. The same predictable fee whether Bitcoin hits 200K or 2 million. Don't leave your family's future to chance. There's strength in many. Visit onrampbitcoin.com/inheritance. That is onrampbitcoin.com/inheritance.
Because that's what this is about, at least in my mind. So I don't know who had this link. Brian? Probably?
Yeah, I brought this.
Yeah.
So it's our boy, Bill Miller, quotes reading, basically something talking about, that, Bitcoin's not a store of value. Classic stuff. By definition, if it has some sort of tail risk, it can't be a store of value. And Bill says, you're confusing volatility and tail risk and failing to account for the fact that Bitcoin is a capital governance system with less risk than any alternative yet devised.
Fucking fire, bro. Sorry. This is so fire.
Yeah, banger sentence.
Wow.
Yeah. But my takeaway was less even about like the proverbial quantum tail risk. To me, what he's getting at here is like, when Bitcoiners talk about Bitcoin as a risk-off asset, it's not because it's, we ignore the volatility and like just stomach it. And, the reason we think it's risk-off is because it's not just an asset. Like, it's not just a number on a screen. It is a decentralized network. Importantly, it is monetary policy at the end of the day. It is a set of rules around monetary policy that cannot change. And that is what he's talking about to me, where he's saying, yes, this asset that you perceive as volatile, it doesn't have the tail risk of inflating the supply at the end of the day. Like, that is the 21 million. That is the promise of the code, the mathematics that supports the system. And most people don't see it as that. They see it as the asset. They see it as this volatile number on a screen. But like, the reason we think it's risk off and the most risk off asset you could hold is because we know what the monetary policy is. And there's no other money in human history that has ever been the case. And frankly, like, that's a huge component of my personal thesis on it is like, this is just monetary policy that anyone on earth can trust is not going to change. And that is powerful. And if you understand money, if you understand what money is meant to do, the purpose it is meant to achieve, like, that is the best quality that you could have. So that's why you stomach the volatility, because this thing is unchanging in terms of its rules, its governance, and ultimately the supply.
Yeah. And this is exactly what these people don't understand. I will show you just a quick other tweet because it ties into it. I think I saw this. Hasbro
Yeah,
is being
it's great.
sued by its own shareholders for printing so many damn magic cards, destroying the long-term value of the brand. This is how people think about Bitcoin when they say, like, it's BD babies, Pokemon cards, something. I think what you just said, Brian, is absolutely correct. They think about it as an investment or like a stock, like a single unit, something you buy, like a rare Beanie Baby or Labubu or whatever. But they fail to understand that it is this entire system, like you said. It's this network in all these different ways, right? There's all these incentives for people to uphold the integrity of this chain, and what we talked about in the beginning. But this, capital governance system with less risk than any alternative yet devised, right? Like, in essence, what he's, I think, talking about, like you said, is this monetary protocol. It is just that. That is the outset. That is the start. It's like, these are my rules. If you want to follow my rules, well, you can only gain value from using me as the coin, as the network, if you follow the rules. And you can trust that other people also follow the rules, because that's the only way that they can play, basically. And once you wrap your head around that, you actually understand that all this other fuckery in the fiat money system does not have this governance, right? It's an unequal playing field. It's a zero-sum game. There are certain people that win, and there are certain people that lose. And here, it is an equal opportunity for anyone to participate in this network, wherever you are from, whatever your religion is, whatever your skin color is, however much money you have. All these things are irrelevant for Bitcoin. And so one thing, Mike, I see you're jumping. I wanted to reply to this, but this guy blocked me. I don't really know why. Maybe I called him regarded, but I thought it was funny. He said, by definition, this is in response to my point that a store of value, by definition, cannot have a tail risk. I don't know which asset doesn't have a tail risk, but you just mentioned, Mike, about gold. You can make gold in this fucking hadron collider, or where did they make the super tiny gold particle? There's infinite gold in the universe. Basically, there's people spending time and energy on figuring out asteroid mining, right? So what is he talking about? That I don't think this is a good argument, but I wonder, Mike, what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. The card thing was interesting because sometimes, like, I think about Bitcoin and how hard it is, but then how also easy. And like, when I got into Bitcoin, when I realized it was like the price was going up, and then you just look it up real quick and you realize there's only 21 million. And if the market has subscribed some value to it, or ascribed some value to it, then you basically start digging into like, well, is there really only 21 million? Because if they're already starting to put some value, and 21 million globally is a pretty small number. That was all it really took. Then obviously you have to go deeper to how it works and then understanding money. But the point being is it's kind of shocking when you don't think about more people, growing up playing with like Pokemon and collecting sports cards. You understand scarcity. It's actually innate, right? Scarcity and value and how you think about art. So it's always, so I think this ends up more of like the truest sense of enlightenment, because people that are born into a world where Bitcoin exists and the rationale of infinite amount of dollars, it just becomes a rational economic expression of your value to put it in something scarce. But I think we just got poured into a world where there's just, this level of the dollar propagating that makes it hard to unwind those things, which another testament to this past week, because all these things that were in these letters were things that most people that have really gone down the rabbit hole knew were true. Yeah, there was something that came up about Britney Spears, and we won't post it, but if you're curious about like Britney Spears, like you can look it up on Twitter. But the point being is there's just all this craziness that's actually truth, but it's looked at as conspiratorial because the internet didn't exist. And now the internet exists, and you can do your own research, and you can also find out what Michael Burry doesn't get Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has fundamentals.
Yeah. Here's a thing that I wanted to check with you guys. So this was a whole. It's so funny, like you said, Brian. Like when Bitcoin comes down, all these people come out of the woodwork, right, with their hot takes. They never pay attention, but they're like, "I've always been telling you, it's not a store of value. It's not this. It's not that. It's bullshit." And blah blah. Okay, so Bob Kendall report, a 42-year veteran of technical analysis.
Portfolio
I've been waiting
expert.
for. Hmm?
His
I have a PhD. I have
portfolio expert.
I had a guy also this week saying like, I'm a multimillionaire in a CFA. I said, okay,
I
cool,
saw
dude.
that.
Cool, dude. You did a CFA. Amazing, dude. You're a CFA. Wow. Okay. I've been waiting for someone to ask this because I've actually been inside this machine. I operated as a market maker on the Pacific Coast, blah, 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 blah. It's all about paper Bitcoin. Right. So he said, actually 20-30% of what actually trades is controlled with fractional leverage, meaning a small group can move price without owning anything real when we've watched this play out in real time, etc. Our buddy Larry Lepard said, paper Bitcoin is a thing. So is paper gold. One important distinction, gold has never gone up 6.3 times in 7 months like Bitcoin did from October 2020 to March 21. Write a paper Bitcoin short, get your face ripped off. So wanted to check with you guys, and we kind of touched upon this before, also in the Reddit post, right? But I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to try to play fiat games on Bitcoin, obviously, right? Like that incentive is always there. But because with Bitcoin, you either have the Bitcoin or you don't, right? Bitcoin allows for any participant in any structure or agreement to actually, like Mike also pointed out with strategy, to demand the proof of reserves, basically, right? You either have the Bitcoin or you don't. And so if you tell me I have the Bitcoin and I say, prove it to me, sign this challenge, with your wallet, and I see it. Yeah, if you don't do it, I know I cannot trust you, because there is this mechanism that there's this tool that I can use to force your transparency. Does that make sense? Okay, so with gold, so with Bitcoin, this is much easier. So although people are going to play games on it, I don't think you can abstract it as much as you can on, for example, physical gold. Does that make sense? Because like it's way more difficult to actually prove you have the gold, right? And there's even ways you could fake that, right? Like a third party says, yeah, I am a certified gold custodian, whatever.
We understand. You're describing why multi-institution exists, because when banks have to issue paper notes, they're going to be able to verify. It's also why the DAT trade doesn't make sense, because if they aggregate all the Bitcoin, then you end up with all these funny games.
Yeah, so
or the government seizes it.
Yeah, so I just want to check this thought with you. Like, yes, there's paper Bitcoin. People are going to fuck around. But I think there's less wiggle room before you are exposed or before you blow up. Does that make sense? I just would love to get your thoughts on that.
It makes sense, but not, well, I guess it makes sense maybe if you're coming at it from the angle is that because it's a global geopolitical held asset or increasingly held by sovereigns, and you can hunt out the positions that are offsides. So you'll basically expose them in that respect. There's probably a lot of other reasons, but like the point being is
It's
this isn't like,
easier than with gold, I would say, or silver.
yeah, I don't know enough about the gold markets and how you can move them. But the point being is that it's more transparent. So you actually have more identifiable ways to hunt out positions and where there's leverage. Now, that opens up a whole other can of worms. Me and Brian were riffing on last night about some of these hedge funds out of like Hong Kong that aren't like crypto funds, but how they got IBIT exposure and then had options trading. And then maybe they got, pulled into the 1010 or silver trade. And then that's what's pulling the market down from selling. But point being is that because you have a like open borderless asset, if you're Russia or you're Bhutan or UAE and you're accumulating this asset and you have people that can understand some of the muckery that's happening, and it's also not in your best interest, you can go and hunt out those positions to basically liquidate them, which to your point, like theoretically would make it easier to have less of the fuckery than more of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing it. That it's because it's more transparent, because it's digital. There is less wiggle room. I like that way that you described it, Bram. There's less wiggle room for these paper games, and while they will exist and have existed for some time, it's much easier to basically either hunt out someone else's position or um, basically just have the truthful ledger to know whether something's there or not. And like, an example of um, where the games can still be played is like FTX, right? Like everyone just thought they had the Bitcoin, but it wasn't there because they had sold it or they never even bought it. They just took the dollars and did whatever they wanted with it. So to Michael's initial point, it's like, yeah, that's why we need better standards for custody that actually are transparent, auditable in real time, have multiple counterparties involved so that you're not trusting a single counterparty. Because ultimately, that's part of why games are easier with gold, not only because of its physical nature, but because it historically has centralized with single counterparties.
And it goes back to like the fiat deal of the reason why you don't put central control of the money or of the custody is because we're humans and we're fallible. So you take that governance out, per Bill Miller. And so it's rational. Like, again, it goes back to understanding Bitcoin. If the thought is a centralized entity is going to create a bank around that, well, we know that, from UTXOs and on the blockchain, you can't do the transactions. So you have to create these other layers. Well, the only way to understand the other line is if it's held in a form that's transparent, but there's no transparency delivered there. So you see like going down those progressions, they're not even rationally like making they'll have the understanding. So like, yeah, it's there. It's just, we're just so early.
I mean, yeah, I agree with that. I had to think about something we talked about before, where I think it was the Bank of England who had or like the biggest like bullion exchange or whatever in London, or the Bank of England. I don't even know. They were like, yeah, there's a little snafu with our tagging system, and it's all gonna be great, and we're gonna have a press conference, and yeah, nothing to worry about. That was basically their way of mitigating the fact that I think people couldn't get certain bullion out of their vault or something like that. I mean, that is how early we are, because that still works. While at the same time, there's a neutral digital asset that exists with absolute scarcity that is verifiable by anyone, right? And you can force this transparency on anyone that says they hold it. But even at those levels, they still rely on PR or like what did I say? Press conferences to just assure the safety and security. So I agree. I think it's just really early. I think just people they don't understand it, and they don't see it. I want to check your time, guys. We have 3 links left.
Good.
Good. Okay, Mike.
Yeah. So I think this ties into just like the market going out being somewhat healthy. Ideally, we talked about it early, but also on the crypto side, there was multiple people leaving yesterday. Just interesting that it came up with like the largest, nominal downwards, kind of whatever we're going to call the Bitcoin, the billions that were evaporated in value. But it ties back to the notion of there was Solana and Kyle Samani stepping down. I think you referenced like there's not really anything outside of monetary use cases for crypto, which is still, obviously we know there's only Bitcoin for crypto or digital assets and storing wealth. But then the other one was Ethereum. And I don't even fully know, Brian will be able to like explain better, but the notion of Vitalik coming out and saying that I guess like layer twos didn't make sense. These roll-ups that created, had billions of dollars in invested capital to go build a scalability. And there's two sides to this coin, because one of them is, I think there's from sophisticated participants understanding that there's value in cross-border payments via stablecoins. There's value in storing value in a borderless form of money, in Bitcoin and all the properties there. And then the reality is, from an efficiency and whatever, they're going to, securitize physical, non-physical assets and tokenize them. But outside of those respects, like there's not really any use cases for a lot of this stuff. But the problem is that like there's still, where crypto has like recognized and where the sentiment really is deep down, I don't think TradFi fully understands this yet. And so when you have these large firms adopting it, most of them, just this morning it came out, I think Bitwise is launching a Uniswap ETP or ETF. Point being is that TBD on the names on who's going to be launching crypto brokerages, but they're still going to offer all these products and services, which opens up their attack surface, like kills credibility long term, blah blah blah. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword that it's cool to see the realization coming and the sentiment in the crypto industry. I still think that because we live in these like small fractals of distribution of knowledge of people that have been here, like think about Samani, he's like the most sophisticated crypto person. We're not saying it much, but he's been there forever and seen that it doesn't make any sense. And so I still think that we have a long way to go from TradFi still trying to figure it out, because they just think of like digital assets as in as a sector or a asset class versus basically Bitcoin and then dollars on the blockchain.
Yeah, we talked about this last week when you weren't there. I said American Hodl told me, as Bitcoiners, we are probably 8 years ahead of all the other people. And it's funny because this is exactly how I feel about TradFi getting into crypto. It's like 2017 all over again. But they weren't there, but they're still, doing this. And I saw this. Yeah, I don't know the guy. What's his name?
Vitalik? Oh no.
No, like
Money.
what is Forward Industries, the world's most leading Solana treasury company? Okay. By the way, I thought this was funny too. Zama, never heard of it. I've been in this for over 10 years. Zama is an open source cryptography company that builds state-of-the-art, fully homomorphic encryption solutions for blockchain. Okay.
It's a homo blockchain. It says it's a homomorphic.
Homoerotic blockchain. Yeah. I had wait, give me 1 sec. Now I lost my. I like spicy safety. Yeah, here.
Yeah, this was what Michael was referencing, that Vitalik earlier this week had this, essay long post on X, basically just like full circle, saying L2s don't make sense. And for people that don't have the context, like the reason L2s became a thing. So like, think of like Arbitrum, Sui, all these other blockchains that sort of built around the Ethereum ecosystem, frankly, because like there was a recognition by Vitalik initially, and then like the Ethereum developers, that Ethereum on the base chain wasn't scaling, wasn't cheaper and as fast as newer entrants, i.e. Solana. And so they needed to scale in a different way and build all these L2s that then would settle back to the base chain of Ethereum. And he's basically just admitting like that never made sense. And he's saying, oh, now we can just do it on the base chain, but it's circular logic, because the reason he's saying they can do it on the base chain now is because like, oh, fees are low. It's like, well, that's because no one's using the chain. And so it's like, it's this very circular, very circular logic of like continuing to pivot back. Like, they tried to be ultrasound money, then they were the world computer, then, now they needed L2s, now they don't need L2s. Like it's
oil, digital oil.
And
What was it?
The broader higher level thing that, Michael, you were talking about it, like TradFi, like I do think that there is some recognition on the side of TradFi, fintechs, banks that are coming in, that they're realizing like, okay, like there is marginal improvements to be made here in terms of tokenizing assets, stable coins, but we don't need Ethereum. Like we don't need these quote unquote public decentralized blockchains. Like we're just going to build them ourselves. And so you've seen Stripe and Tempo do this. I think PayPal doing something similar. Like they're just going to build their own private blockchains. And it kind of like goes back to like what was talked about in like the 17, 18 days around like enterprise blockchain and these more private blockchains is like, yeah, just if all you're needing out of this is a faster, cheaper database, it doesn't need to be decentralized because it's not money. It's just infrastructure for financial markets. And there's been a lot of other tweets in the past several weeks and months that are speaking to this. And some of it's from these crypto natives like Samani and some of it's from Bitcoiners, but it's basically being like, yeah, there's kind of an admission that a lot of this stuff never made sense. And particularly as it relates to like value accrual to these native tokens. Like there may be value, marginal benefits to better, faster databases, but you don't need a token attached to it that is not money, that is not actually decentralized. And so I think a lot of these new players, whether it's the banks or fintechs, are realizing that, and they're just building their own shit, and they don't care about all this other stuff that's existed for the past 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, just to contradict myself a little bit, because I know where Brian's going, is like they're not going to use it. They still are going to use these things for two reasons. One is because they will get sold a bill of goods around. They can use it. They can incentivize. They can have a bag. They'll push their clients into other products because they're utilizing it. But more importantly than that is what you're describing. And I heard this on another podcast. It was a really good example of when you build these like enterprise blockchains. That's effectively what like Venmo is today, right? Or Cash App, because like you can send within Venmo or a Cash App. So you're going to need that interconnected layer of an open blockchain so you can basically settle. That's why like Ethereum still has the vast proportion of stable coins and then Solana picking up. So I agree, but also like these things will persist and people will find theoretical narratives to validate why they'll put them in front of their clients.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say sunk cost fallacy. I mean, I walked around in a traditional bank like 8 years ago, and they were exploring, crypto and using blockchain as for tracking commodity trading, blah blah. Never did anything fundamentally come out of that. Still not after 8 years, but there's a lot of funding in there. There's a lot of cool stories, innovation, whatever. So
Well,
I feel this.
one thing just to add to that, and because I know where Brent's going, it's like the sunk cost fallacy is real when you have a well-regarded, long tenured institution. I won't name, but there is one that just launched the past 6 months, Solana, right? So at what point does that firm say, "Oh yeah, Solana was BS"? Like, it'll be a long road before they're like, so like there's just going to be that natural deal for them to like get to the other side, especially when their pockets and their like reputation, they put that in front of clients and now they have to eat,
But again, just like we did over the last 8 years, further and further and further.
But there's a reason why individuals are easy to buy Bitcoin personally, and then like institutions are harder to get involved, and then all that inertia to get involved, and it's going to take to unwind it. They probably won't exist. Like they'll just die because they'll get themselves blown up because their attack surface is just supporting all these crypto assets, and then the long tail risk of everything being tokenized. And then you have a deleveraging event, which are only going to continue. Probably pull down a lot of financial firms.
Fully agree. Okay, last one, Mike.
So to paraphrase this, I was just thinking about it the other day about like what's going on, and it's ultimately the fundamentals from anybody paying attention to this industry around Bitcoin have at a minimum 5 to 10x in the past 24 months, and the price is fallen by 40 to 50%. So if you deeply understand that, that's just full asymmetry, and understanding that this is a longer game, but that the fundamentals have never been stronger. And then it goes back to what we talked about earlier, focus on your craft and delivering value. Because it's pretty simple is you just park and hold. Everyone that has ever held any financial asset that has accrued in purchasing power has literally sat on their hands. Every investor you look at, some of the famous investors have had that exact same common denominator of like getting away from the screen and just going back and keeping themselves busy. And in this circumstance, most individuals should just go and deliver value to the world and then stack more Bitcoin. Over time, they'll increase their purchasing power, which will give them more optionality in the world. It's really that simple. And so I think that this really, I put this here because it ties into like this past week's narrative around, quantum, the Epstein stuff. And we're not going to get into it because we've gone on for like an hour and a half, but all the Blockstream and Jeremy Rubin and like all these people, like it's all crazy. And yeah, like we should look at some of the core devs and the things that have been incentivizing people with more scrutiny and try to back into like, well, what were the incentives or reasons for doing things? Like that's all valid, but none of that changes the dynamic of like what we just talked about here in Bitcoin's fundamentals. And I don't think there's enough people talking about that. I think they'd rather go down these rabbit holes of, well, what if this and what if that? It's like none of that changes what we talked about in this tweet.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I just realized I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 70+% drawdowns in this fucking journey, but also this was 93%. Yeah, that's so brutal, so brutal. Yeah, I love this, dude. I think this is a great positive ending. Also, that just this if you do the work, you understand what this is, and then you understand that no one really understands it um fully, but you see the direction as where it's going, and the reason of existence is becoming more and more clear every day. And this is a wild west. It's a war of ideas. It's a war of noise, and I think the biggest challenge you have is to not fade yourself, right? So if you do the work and reflect and take that little red pill and just realize you have no fucking clue what money is, and there's other people know better than you that control the money, and you need a neutral, decentralized system to escape from, then that is this. But it takes a long time to get that, and also it is it is the hodling journey is really hard. And so I think this is a positive note. So thanks for that.
Yeah. The only thing worth adding is I was, texting with folks a lot over the week and just reflecting on, imagine somebody coming in 2020, 21, 22, and all you're doing is trying to like buy some Bitcoin and you got everything under the sun just getting thrown at you. At a certain point, unless your confidence and conviction education is at a certain level, you would capitulate because it's like, what am I doing here? I got pedo Mossad coin, or as they're talking about on Twitter, Goy coin, hanging out there. I got quantum, I got people that are smart like Nick fudding and going out there. So then you're like trying to discern who's real, who's not. You have these treasury companies that you told to buy that are down 90%. You don't know what to do with that. You cut your losses, buy Bitcoin. You have all of these things. And it's the real reality of why people just stick with the 60/40 because you're maybe real purchasing power is reducing a little bit, but at least it's a slow bleed. And the social proof and signal is that you're not going to, be associated with Epstein and all this crazy stuff. So it goes back to just like the best thing to do if you don't have to get involved in this industry is literally just to buy the thing, feel confident, and then go back to work and just put all the screens away. And
Yeah,
then we all
exactly.
we all feel confident.
If you
that
just
we
never
go
looked at the price for the past 5 to 10 years, you weren't on Twitter and you were just DCAing every day, like you just live your life and you store your value in a superior savings technology and none of the noise matters. But the reality of human psychology and our monkey brains is that we look at the screen, we look at the numbers, and ultimately that's what compounds and shakes people out if you don't have that deep understanding and ability to withstand a lot of that noise. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope people found this valuable. This was probably our longest episode yet, but also quite a crazy 2 weeks. So for everyone watching, if you enjoyed, please hit the follow button, like button, follow us on YouTube, Spotify, etc. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And also send us questions. And by the way, I think Michael is making merch. So I don't know if Mike has any samples yet, but there's going to be merch. I heard there's merch.
I do have some. I was going to bring them. I didn't know if we would bring it out. I'll bring it for next week, and then we'll do some kind of giveaway. We'll figure it out.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thanks
boys.
everyone for watching, and we'll see you
guys.
next time.